Tarek Al-Nahas, Group Head of International Banking at Mashreq Bank. Really wonderful to be here on the sidelines of COP28 with you.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you as well.
So let's start off with how Mashreq integrates sustainability within its products and projects as well as its strategies as well.
Look, let me take you back to the origin. So Mashreq is the oldest bank in the UAE and historically known probably more for the first bank to launch many products in the local market. But also what we're extremely proud of now is really where we're leading in the market in the ESG space. So whereas our social responsibilities have been clear for years, our governance is really second to none. We have an international presence as well. I'm going to get into that in a bit. So our governance, really the level of governance that we need to constantly maintain in the bank is extremely elevated. But it's also leading now in the space of the sustainability-led financing space and really the role that Mashreq is starting to play in the region in that space that is really, really exciting as well.
So you formulate strategies for Mashreq's international business, and your vision, I've been reading, is to facilitate sustainable finance of up to $30 billion by 2030. Tell us about the strategy behind that and some of the untapped markets you're looking into as well.
Sure, that's correct. Our aim is to facilitate 30 billion by 2030. It's part of, and you've just heard it, just this morning, the UBF with the central bank announced that the Emirati banking sector together will facilitate about 1 trillion dirhams in financings by 2030. So we very much form part of that. It was a number that we had put in initially, but is now forms part of a much bigger number that we collectively now as UAE banks have to commit to. And we actually think that those numbers are achievable. You mentioned the international markets. We've actually been leading some sustainability-linked financings across various markets. We've done deals in Egypt. We've done 2 very large announcements in Bahrain last week, where we led on both of those deals. We've done deals in Africa, deals in Turkey. We've done India, and actually we've done a deal in Hong Kong recently. So what's clear, Laura, is that this is not a passing trend. This is the financing of the future. That's what companies are looking for. Their investors are expecting it. Their boards are expecting it. Their clients are expecting them to be able to raise financing in a responsible manner. And we're very excited to be part of that. Now, the ability to replicate and also educate clients as well is also a big part of that as well. It's there's a whole process you have to go through in setting up your KPIs. Banks can help facilitate with that. And again, it's not only lending into sustainability-led financing, but it's also our role as a sustainability coordinator that is actually probably the most interesting part of this, because that's really where you're setting up the actual strategy with the client.
That leads me into some of the misconceptions around sustainable finance. What are those misconceptions? And also, what are the challenges around bankable projects as well?
I'll start with the challenge around bankable projects. I think you probably got more supply than you have demand right now. Okay, so actually banks are very keen to commit the funding, the capital to projects. I think it's the slowness is coming actually from the project side, the demand side. So that's probably the biggest challenge. Now, the biggest opportunity, and you'd be surprised here because I'm gonna talk slightly out of context, but actually, if you just look at last week's signings that we had in Bahrain, what sectors are those? One was the National Oil Company of Bahrain. that raised $2.5 billion. And the other one was actually the largest steel plant in Bahrain. Now, typically, in the traditional definition of green financing or eco-friendly financing, those are not typically sectors where you'd expect sustainability-linked financings to be occurring. Whereas, in fact, if you actually think about it, if those kind of companies can adopt KPIs to either reduce their emissions or start using more sustainable energy sources, whether sun or solar or wind, actually it's those companies that can move the needle probably much more than many other sectors. Okay, so if you look at the GCC, you can do something for the national oil companies in the GCC, you're really moving the needle. That is the biggest sector in the region. So, so actually, there's a bit of misconception that those are sectors we can't lend into. Actually, we actually look at it as sectors where, if we do lend into those sectors and they do transition, the impact of those financings could be actually very large.
So what sort of sustainable finance solutions are we talking about, and what are you seeing has the sort of most growth potential?
Again, I can't decide KPIs for companies. What I can do is advise on where we think in the industry should be the KPIs, but at the end of the day, KPIs are set by the company because they are the ones that are going to be obliged to meet those KPIs. We take that very seriously as well. I mean, this is not about just putting in some KPIs and just ignoring it. No, this is very serious. Companies have to abide by them, and as financing banks, we have to also be heavily monitoring those KPIs to make sure that what was promised is being delivered. Now, the way to do that as well is also to incentivize companies to meet those KPIs. So what we've worked a few deals on is where actually companies will actually get a pricing reduction as they meet certain KPIs. So the way it works is I start off with a financing at X price, and then if you meet certain KPIs, you actually get a price reduction, and the next KPI you get a further reduction. So then there's an incentive also for the companies to be meeting those. And keep in mind, these are not bilateral. Many of these are not bilateral transactions. The last deal that we signed actually had more than 25 banks in there. So those are KPIs that you're having to deliver not only to yourself and your shareholders, but also to a large group of banks as well. I actually think that's probably a huge opportunity. And the other opportunity is the ability to, well, not replicate, because every company will have its own KPIs, but you know, when one company in a certain sector sees you doing an inaugural deal for in another country, we often get calls saying, hold on, listen, you guys worked on that deal, can you come and tell us what we can be doing as well? So the ability to continue, you know what I mean, to then transfer that knowledge within the industry to other countries is actually a huge opportunity for us.
Knowledge transfer is
yes.
So important, as you said. What sort of appetite are you seeing then when it comes to green and varied sustainable finance solutions then? What appetite is there?
Well, again, the bank appetite is there. The numbers that have been communicated are very large numbers. So the bank appetite is there. Now, to be perfectly honest, we also work in 13 countries. So different clients may have different requirements based on the geographies they're in. So it's for us, yes, while as a head office we are regulated by the Central Bank of the UAE, and we are very much a part of the UAE national net to zero targets. We also have to be cognizant that as an international, well, as a regional bank, we also have regional requirements from our regulators. So, so different countries moving at different speeds from each other. Now, what we try and do is, because we actually learn from the different countries, so we can take best practices in some countries and actually apply them in others. But again, like regulatory requirements, I'm obliged to always meet the requirements of the countries in which I operate. head office and where I operate.
You spoke earlier about India, Egypt, Bahrain, India, Turkey. Any other countries you're looking at right now?
Well, right now we've just got a license in Oman. We're hopefully going to apply for another license in the region very soon. We've got a digital banking license which has been given to us in Pakistan. So we actually think that we're on a nice little roll, and it really is that kind of innovation, not only product innovation but idea innovation, that we think we can actually roll out into the new countries where we've just been offered licenses.
Going back to COP28 for a moment, and it's my final question. So going back to COP28, what have been the most exciting announcements when it comes to sustainable finance so far? And is there anything else that you're hoping that might be announced this week?
Well, look, again, there's been a couple of big announcements. That, the issue with I think in the past was that there was a lot of talk but not some concrete numbers. I think there's been certain numbers that have been announced in the past 2-3 days on the $30 billion fund you mentioned earlier, but also on the trillion dirham financing package that the UAE banks will be committed to meeting. And I think, look, we've got to put some numbers against it. It grows from there, it snowballs from there, but you've got to start somewhere. And I think what has been extremely successful in this COP is the commitment of both the UAE government, but also all the partner banks and partner institutions to really start putting some real material numbers around the promises in the past.
And I really feel like the tagline for the event this year is turning ambition into action, and we've seen that this week quite a lot, haven't we?
I think so, yeah. And the nice thing about it is also the individual efforts. So, for example, the UBF announcement today, it just sort of puts everyone into this pool, and everyone has to be committed to that pool, rather than individual efforts of different financial institutions. So I'm actually quite excited by it all, and I think it's also going to give us the opportunity, as well as UAE banks, is also to work together more substantially, so that we all meet our collective targets and the collective targets for the country as well. So I'm very excited.
Really fantastic to sit down with you. Thank you so much for that brilliant insight into what you're doing.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Over at Mashreq. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.